Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm here with my lovely colleague, Lucia. And as you probably know, what we're going to talk about today is just going through an overview of AML regulations and getting started with compliance. So, the regulations in the art market came into play in January 2020. What that means is that art market participants, that means galleries, art advisories, auction houses, consultants, need to comply with a set of rules designated to prevent criminals from using art transactions to hide illegal money. What is AML? AML is anti-money laundering. It's procedures that you put in place with the purpose of stopping criminal proceeds from making their way into financial systems. Who does this apply and who needs to register with HMRC? Art market participants must comply with regulations if a single transaction exceeds 10,000 euros or if a series of transactions with one same collector go through and exceed 10,000 euros. So where do I begin? Getting set up with AML, it can be split into four sections. The first is an AML policy. An AML policy, anti-money laundering policy, or also known as a PCP, is a procedural document that determines the steps and the processes that you have in place to comply with regulations. To give you an example, it's going to be talking about things like how you request IDs and proofs of address from your collectors. It's going to talk about whether or not you're compliant with GDPR and data protection laws, and what you do and what kind of information you collect and review when making assessments on your clients. The next thing that you need to have in place is a risk assessment. A risk assessment looks at your business through the lens of regulations and determines where it might be at risk. So it's going to be looking at things like the location for the collectors that you transact with, the average size of your transactions, whether you deal with remote clients versus in-person collectors and things like that, all of which affect the risk that your business is, exposed to. The next thing is AML training. AML training looks at your business through the lens of regulations and determines where you might be at risk. The point of the AML training is every single one in your team that is in any way connected to the transaction. So from requesting information, invoicing clients, and reviewing AML reports, they need to carry out formal AML training. This needs to be updated every 12 months. The same goes for the AML policy and the risk assessment. These documents need to be updated every 12 months or if there's any changes within your business. To give you an example, you might have been dealing with a lot of US clients, and that's evident in your risk assessment. However, in the next 12 months, you see an increase in the European market. All of that needs to be reflected in your documents. Lastly, we have the ongoing due diligence. Put simply, due diligence is a process of checking who your customers are to make sure that they are genuine and not involved in legal activities. This includes verifying their identity, it includes understanding where their money comes from, and also monitoring their process and profile for any suspicious activity. All of this, of course, can be managed within Arcarta, so we can always give you a hand drafting both your AML policy and risk assessment, getting you and your team ready with AML training, and the ongoing and continuous monitoring of your collectors. So now I'm going to pass it on for my lovely colleague, Lucia, who is going to walk you through the due diligence process.
Thank you, Nicole, for the excellent explanation of the key steps in AML. Now I will walk you all through the stages of customer due diligence, from verifying your client's identity to understanding and mitigating risks. It's important to note that the steps I'm sharing today are the legal minimum requirements to ensure you are complying with AML regulations. These checks are essential for minimizing your exposure to financial crime. I will also be using Arcarta's due diligence report to help illustrate exactly what information needs to be collected and to give you a clear idea of what a completed due diligence reports look like. This will help you understand the process and the key pieces of information that need to be gathered to stay compliant. Now, please bear with me a moment. I'm going to share my screen with you. Now you all can see my screen. Well, the first step is all about know your customer, commonly referred to as KYC. This is the process of verifying your client's identity to ensure they are who they say they are. It's essential that you collect the necessary information. This would include a government issued ID, such as a passport or driver's license, and a proof of address, like a utility bill or bank statement. With Arcarta, we have streamlined this process. All you need to do is request your client's ID and proof of address. The platform automatically collects the information and creates a report in just a few seconds. Once a report is generated, it's ready for you to review. Then, once you have confirmed your client's identity, the next step is to assess the risks involved in transacting with them. In this stage, we look at several key factors. These include occupational risk. In our Cartas report, we have classified it as positive information, as you can see in the report. This means that assessing the client's occupation and any risks tied to that, meaning that you need to understand where your client's money is coming from before transacting with them. Then you need to look at global watch list. In our Cartas report, we have classified it as negative information. This helps identify clients who might be involved in high risk activities. You will need to check if your client appears on any of the following. The first one is PEP, so this means politically exposed persons lists. These lists include individuals who hold or have held a prominent public position. To give you an example, the US president is a PEP, but also David Beckham. So you see these two have very different profiles, but both are public. Then the second one is sanctions checks lists. These lists are created by governments or international bodies and include individuals, companies, or countries that are subject to economic or trade restrictions. Third one would be the regulatory enforcement lists. These lists are maintained by regulators or enforcement agencies that highlight entities or individuals who have been found guilty of financial crimes or regulatory breaches. Then it would be the jurisdictional risks list. These lists contain countries or regions that are considered high risk for money laundering or other illicit activities. And the last one is adverse media. This is a Google search that what you're searching for is any negative media coverage or reports, such as links to criminal activity or financial issues. Now, once all the information is collected, you need to review it. And if the client possesses no significant risks, you can approve the report and proceed with the transaction. And then this would be the end of the customer due diligence. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I realize that I've given you a lot of information in just 5 minutes. So I'm going to briefly summarize what you need to collect for an effective customer due diligence. So this is ID and proof of address verification, then understanding risks through standard due diligence. And finally, once you have gone through all these risks, you can approve your report and proceed with confidence in your transaction. Well, thank you everyone for being here. Please note that with tools like Arcarta, you can make AML process quicker and easier with a fully compliant report generated in seconds. By following these steps, you can ensure you're not only compliant with legal requirements, but also protecting your business and the broader art market. And now we are going to move forward with the Q&A section and common misconceptions. So please pop any questions that you have in the Zoom chat.
Thank you very much, Lucia. That was very interesting. Regarding the questions, we already have a few clients that provided some questions as well as some common misconceptions that we hear very often in the art market. So I can see the first one is but I know all of my clients in person have been dealing with them for the last 10 years. Do I still need to do this? This is something that we hear very often, and it's a very common misconception in the art market. We completely understand that the relationships that you build and the relationships that you have with your collectors do affect the risk that the client might, present in the art market. However, one thing to bear in mind is that it's not about what you know, it's about what you can prove. What that means is that in the event of an intervention, if a regulator is asking you about a specific report or a specific collector, saying that you've known them for 10 years is never going to be enough. You always have to be sure you're satisfying the legal minimum required, which is what Lucia just kindly showed us. The next one we have over here, Lucia, is I've heard that there is a threshold against sales. All of my sales are under 10,000 euros. Does this mean that I don't need to perform customer due diligence?
Well, this is also a very good question, and we also hear a lot because while there is a threshold for certain transactions, it's important to know that the requirement to perform customer due diligence is not solely based on the value of an individual sale. In fact, it applies to accumulative transactions with one collector over the course of a year. So we would also recommend that even if your sales are consistently under 10,000 euros, you may still want to perform a CDD in certain circumstances, just because, for example, if you're dealing with high risk clients or if you have concerns about the source of funds, CDD should still be conducted.
Thank you, Lucia. That's very true. And I'll add one piece of information to that as well, is that regardless of the size of the transaction, it's always going to be crucial that we're able to verify that we're not dealing with sanctioned individuals, countries, entities, etc. So that's something that it's outside of AML and CDD, but very important that we are continuously verifying as a business. The next question I have over here is, once this has all been completed, how do I store this information? Is there anything that I need to do once I've obtained the necessary documents? This is a great question, and something that I've noticed a lot of people that are doing things manually sometimes disregard. The reason why I say that is that AML regulations, it doesn't mean that once you have a report, you can put it in a file and not think about it again. First thing that you need to know is you do need to store this information for a period of 5 years, which is the legal minimum, and it's also the business relationship period. During this time, you also need to manage that information. So the way that looks like is that every so often you need to update your report and be mindful of your client's circumstance. Sometimes in a year's time, a client's profile can change. So to give you an example, you might have been dealing with a high net worth individual today. Time they start working in the public sector and they're now politically exposed. That's something that you need to be aware of, especially if it's someone that you expect you'll transact with again in the next 5 years. We have a question here. What happens in the case of an intervention with a regulator? What do I need to be prepared for? This is something we hear very often. Everyone's terrified of interventions or audits. Just to summarize the process, a regulator would be in touch with you. At this point, they'll ask for you to share your AML policy, your risk assessment, and evidence of formal training from you and your team. After this is done, they'll set a time to speak with you. This can be a virtual meeting, a phone call, or even an in-person check to your gallery. Once they're coming to the gallery, they'll initially start testing your knowledge on AML. That's why AML formal training is crucial, because a lot of the questions can be tricky and difficult to answer. They will also then go through your AML policy documents and your risk assessment and test your knowledge of these documents, as well as how well they reflect your day-to-day processes within the gallery. This is something that I stress a lot with most of our clients. It's about making sure that your AML policy and your risk assessment actually speak to your business. We see a lot of galleries coming for our help, having a very off-the-shelf AML policy, and I understand wanting to do something like that. However, it's crucial to bear in mind that a general document is not going to reflect what you are doing in the day-to-day. So this is really important. Once you're done with this section, they'll go through and ask for a series of transactions for a period of time and check those due diligence reports that accompany those transactions. They'll likely be asking you details about certain sales. Why did you decide to go ahead? What is the risk profile? Things like that. The next question we have over here is, Lucia, how do I stay up to date in changes in AML laws?
Well, we would recommend regularly check updates from official sources such as your local financial regulatory authorities, as they often release announcements on changes to AML legislation. Then also platforms like Arcarta will also keep you updated on relevant compliance changes. And then lastly, you can also subscribe to any AML newsletter.
Thank you very much. We now have one question that someone submitted saying, how are galleries handling due diligence at fairs? This is a great question, especially at the back of London Art Fair that just happened, and fairs that are going on in the next few months. I completely understand that. Thinking about AML in an art fair can be very difficult. You, of course, want to be able to move forward the sale as quickly as possible. You're probably very busy handling multiple collectors at once. That's why our Arcarta does have tools in place to help you streamline that process as much as possible. The first is the network. So the Arcarta network makes it so that a collector that has provided information in the past using the platform doesn't have to do so again. That means that active collectors likely have their profile in the network, and they'll simply have to consent to share their information with your business. Additionally to that, we will be soon launching this new feature called Arcarta Predict. Arcarta Predict will allow you to basically get ahead of the due diligence process by doing a soft search on any new collector. So the moment someone comes to the booth, just by having their email address, you'll be able to see their activity in the art market. You'll be able to see whether they've been flagged or approved in the past and their activity within other galleries. Of course, you won't have access to any of the sensitive information, but it does give you a sense of them being a serious collector and their intent to buy. We have one last question over here asking about the subscription cost of Arcarta. That's a very good question. We could always schedule a chat and go about this in a lot more detail, but put briefly, our subscriptions are depending on your requirements and your needs as a business and tailored to you. So we can always chat about this more in a session. All right, I don't think there are any other questions. So to wrap this off and not take a lot more of your time, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that this session has helped you understand the key steps to staying compliant with AML regulations. Just below, my lovely colleague is going to be sharing you a brief video with the key steps that we covered today, but please feel free to get in touch with myself or Lucia if you have any questions. If you have any issues regarding your business, we do have worked with a lot of different art market participants, so we do have the expertise and we'll be able to help you with that process. Thank you very much.